Okay.
Welcome to a climate change presentation, which is titled, What Can We Do? An invitation to think globally, but to act locally. My name is Elva Moser, and I am on the environmental committee of the Montclair League of Women Voters. And that's the reason I'm making this presentation today. There is another very important reason though, and that's because I happen to be the daughter of the queen of recycling of Canfield, Ohio. My mom, for over 30 years, led the efforts in my hometown for recycling, and for many, many, many Saturdays, sorted literally paper and plastic and aluminum personally to forward what we wanted to do in our community. The presentation that I'm showing you was developed by our environmental committee here at the Montclair League of Women Voters, and we did this so we could encourage greater participation in combining climate change globally and also on a local level. We really concentrated on simple and easy things that each and every one of us can do locally and at home to be able to reduce our carbon footprint. So much of the information that I think you'll see today, you probably already know, but our hope is that you'll walk away with just one or two more tips and ideas that you could easily put into practice with what you're already doing. Next slide. What is the League of Women Voters? The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization, and the goal is to encourage informed and active participation of our citizens in government. We influence through public policy that we do in the form of education, such as presentations like this, and also through advocacy. You can see our website is located there on the slide in Montclair, should you need to reach out to us specifically. We do believe in a very international approach to combating climate change, and we think it's necessary both not only to protect public health, but to defend the integrity of our entire global ecosystem. We support climate goals and policies that are consistent with the best available climate science in order to ensure we have a stable climate system for future generations to come. Next slide, please. Global warming is no doubt changing our world, and we learn of so many dangerous weather patterns that seem to be occurring now on at least a weekly basis. One example is the ice cap, which has thinned 40% in just 40 years. What that means is that the polar vortex is weakening, and that is in reference to the counterclockwise motion and flow of the air, which helps keep the colder air near the poles. So the poles are melting, and with everything getting warmer, there is a lot more evaporation of rain and snow. If any of you have been on an Alaskan cruise and seen Glacier Bay, our national park, you'll relate to this. With more than 100,000 glaciers, 95% of them are thinning. And if I look at a picture that I took in the 90s and compare it to what I see on the web today, it's very, very disturbing, let me tell you. Perhaps, however, the most terrifying climate change is heat. Killer heat. Could we go to the next slide, please? Now, this may be a little complex, so I want to explain the slide first to make the points. As you can see at the top of the slide, what this shows is the frequency of extreme heat, what's known as killer heat, that will occur by late century, depending on what the choices are that we as individuals make. This slide represents work that's been done by the Union of Concerned Scientists, who are known for rigorous independent science and technical analysis, along with effective advocacy. So if you look at underneath the heading, you see a line that says average days per year with the heat index above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's what defines killer heat, between 100 and 127 degrees. So under that line, you see, for example, 0 to 1 day is still gray. Yellow means there's been 1 to 10 days with the heat index above 100, and so forth, all the way across the page until you get to the last box, which is reddish brown. That shows 100 to 200 days of extreme heat. So if you take a look at the two maps, you can take what you've learned about these boxes and apply it to what you're seeing. On the left-hand side, by the late century, if there is no action, the very dark reddish brown and other darker colors are much more prevalent than they are on the map on the right-hand side, which shows what would happen if we take rapid action. So according to the NOAA Climate Analysis and Statistics, let's look at January 2020, which was the Earth's hottest January on record in a span of 141 years of climate records. There has never been a warmer January than that one. So it's easy to understand how most of us feel very powerless to influence climate change, but what we do individually can and will collectively have an impact. And if each of us adapt all or at least some of the ideas from this presentation, we can and we will reduce our carbon footprint. Extreme heat is really the deadliest weather hazard we face, and it's killing more people each year than hurricanes, floods, lightning strikes, and frigid cold combined. Next slide, please. So what are the consequences of climate change? Well, we just mentioned loss of life. And another great example comes from June of 2018. Extreme heat killed 70 people in Montreal, Canada. We all know about the economic disruption that is happening as a result of climate change. Just think about all of the infrastructure work that has to be done after every time we have a flood or a forest fire. Another consequence is changing and even extinguishing plant and animal life. A great example is our polar bear population. It's declining rapidly. It's projected by 2050, there are going to be 1/3 fewer of what's only 30,000 polar bears that are now left. Finally, human and animal population dislocation and migration is a huge consequence. EcoWatch, which is a very reputable environmental digital newspaper, published a study that was done by the Brookings Institute, stated that 68.5 million people will be displaced in 2017 due to global warming, with things like floods, forest fires, and intense storms. It's now projected by some that more than 1 billion worldwide will move by 2050 due to the sea level rising. Next slide, please. So what's the actual cause? I think most of you probably know it's CO2, carbon dioxide. Those are our fossil fuels of coal, oil, gasoline, and natural gas. If you add to that methane gas emissions, they come from landfills, our food and green waste, sewage, cows, and thawing of the Arctic permafrost. It is 25 times as potent as carbon dioxide in trapping heat in the atmosphere. It is a greenhouse gas. It's very flammable and very, very potent. And it doesn't meet OSHA's standards for permissible exposure limit. In addition to that, methane gas is a health hazard because it displaces oxygen there is less oxygen to breathe. So people will end up breathing more rapidly, which in turn causes rapid heart rate. And those two factors result in people being clumsier, having accidents, fatigue, emotional upsets, and it can ultimately lead to death. Science informs us that we've reached the most serious and detrimental stage in global warming, and we must take immediate and dramatic action in order to begin this long process of turning this around if we want to save the Earth. Next slide. So how does the US compare with some European countries in the generation of CO2? A typical American household generates 55,000 pounds of CO2 annually. 8% of that comes from just running the household, and that includes things such as heat, water, electricity, and gas. If you also consider then US purchases in the home, 17% that are brought into our house, such as packaging, buying food that is off season, plastic bags, Amazon and the box deliveries we get. And you compared that to the typical German household, they only generate 27,000 pounds of CO2 annually. So we are twice as high in our generation of CO2. Take next a typical Swedish household, which generates 15,000 pounds of CO2 annually. The US is more than 3 times greater in its generation than Sweden. Next slide, please. So as you can see, we Americans are a major part of the problem, but we also can be a major part of the solution, and you can make a difference. Each and every one of us can. Next slide. Let's take a quick look at our culture and habits and find out what small and easy steps that we can take to save the Earth. There is so much to do, but to get a good start, we'll focus on 4 easy categories. These include energy, food, transportation, and waste. Let's review these solutions. And as we do, I'm asking you to make some mental notes of the ones that you currently do and perhaps others that you could start doing. You can help save the planet, and you might save yourself some money in the process, as you'll see. Next slide. Energy. The average home generates twice as much carbon as the average car. So the first thing we can do is wash our clothes in cold water. Also, run a full dishwasher in off-peak hours. So New Jersey's PS&G off-peak hours are 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. in the winter, 9 p.m. to 10 a.m. in the summer. Set your hot water at 120 degrees and your refrigerator between 38 and 40 degrees. Next slide. Also change your thermostat for 4 degrees warmer in the summer and 4 degrees cooler in the winter. This can save you hundreds of dollars a year, and it'll help reduce your carbon footprint. Next slide, please. Light bulbs are a huge opportunity. If everyone in the USA changed 5 light bulbs to LEDs, we would reduce greenhouse gases that is equal to what is produced by 8 million cars. If everyone used only LED light bulbs for 10 years, the electricity saved could equal the output of 44 large power plants. LEDs, I think most of you already know, are light emitting diode light bulbs that are 90% more efficient than incandescent light bulbs. Also, remember to unplug electronics and appliances when they're not in use. I'll tell you, that's one that hits close to home. My partner is constantly unplugging things like the coffee pot, the blender, the toaster. And it's frustrating for me. You know, I squirm a little bit every time I have to plug one back in, but I know he's right. He's right. He's right. He's right. Number two, make sure that you buy Energy Star appliances. And I'm sure most of you also know what those are. They're certified by the government, and they're going to save you energy. They're going to lower your energy bills, and they're also going to reduce emissions. Then number three is to buy local whenever you can and cut back on single item online purchases and try to combine multiple online purchases if it's possible. Next slide, please. Next category of food. Did you know that beef requires 16 pounds of grain just to produce 1 pound of meat? Then if you add the transportation, the packaging, etc., you could see how a diet high in beef is going to create a situation where your body actually emits approximately 5,000 pounds more of CO2 annually than a vegetarian. Who knew? So eat less beef, lamb, and cheese, and instead eat more plant-based meals. Switching from meat to vegetarian meals might not be an easy thing for you to do, but even if you did it once a week, it could make a big difference. You'll get more energy, by the way, from that, and you'll feel healthier and save money at the same time. Purchase local produce and seasonal foods. Participate in your community-supported agriculture. Especially since the COVID pandemic, a number of companies provide organic produce, and they'll ship your preferred orders to you weekly. You can go online and Google this and see what's available for you. Don't purchase more than you can use, and freeze and donate leftovers. Next slide, please. The next category of transportation, drive less. You can do that by combining errands, by carpooling with a friend, walking, biking, or using public transportation. Reduce your car emissions by keeping your tires fully inflated, changing your air filters, and easing up on gas and brakes. Don't leave your car idling for more than 10 seconds. So with good planning and just a few small steps, most people can actually reduce their CO2 auto emission by 20%. Next slide. In the same area of transportation, buy used electric or hybrid cars. Fly less and buy some carbon offsets when you do. These, by the way, are tax deductible. One is listed here, www.flyneutral.org. Another leading provider is TerraPass, TerraPass.com, which is for wind farms. And then another one listed, www.betterworldclub.com, offers green roadside assistance. Work from home, which has been an easy one, recently. We have saved a tremendous amount of CO2 emissions since March of 2020. This may be the only silver lining of the pandemic. Encourage other people you know to work from home as well, which I think is probably a pretty easy sell this day. There was an article in the New York Times, January 15th, 2021. It said that electric cars are better for the planet and often for your budget too. When you purchase these offsets and reduce your carbon footprint, it can help projects across North America and in the world. The offsets often purchase things that support forestry. We mentioned windmills, renewable energy, solar, wave, etc. And they compensate for those emissions in your life, such as airplane travel, that often cannot be reduced or eliminated. There is a lot of discussion about this, and people say, well, do they really work, carbon offsets? And the answer is how depends really on the details. Sometimes the money that you pay in supports a new project or an existing project, or it may reduce in greenhouse gases that's already occurred. Next slide, please. This is an easy one. Take public transportation. It's upgraded and it's convenient. There are reduced fares for seniors and people with disabilities. I think everybody's familiar with New Jersey Transit buses. They serve all of New Jersey along with portions of New York State and Pennsylvania. And you can contact them at the website here if you don't have it, newjerseytransit.com, or call them at 973-275-5555. Next slide, please. They also have rail, take the train. It's part of the system, and the same website and telephone number are available for you there to contact for more information. Next slide, please. In the area of waste, use refillable water bottles, preferably stainless steel or glass. Do not use pre-filled plastic bottles. The reason is because they do become toxic. It's actually not what a lot of people talk about in terms of bottles getting the chemicals leaking into the water. It's more about the fact that they degrade relatively quickly. And if they get cracked, bacteria will grow in them. Avoid buying prepackaged items. Every year, 8 million tons of plastic are dumped into the sea. That equals 1 truckload dumped into the sea every minute of the day. I'm sure some of you have seen the commercials, and they're really tough to look at. Plastic is not biodegradable. As you've seen in these commercials, fish think it is food, they eat it, and then they die. So it's affecting our food population. Unfortunately, 50% of the plastic we use is single use. It's being thrown away immediately after use. Water bottles, plastic straws, plastic bags, as well as the containers that we have for dish soap, laundry detergent, cleaning supplies, etc. There is a new emerging retail business around the country, however. These are bottle refill stores. They're for water, as well as those household items like cleaning fluids, laundry, and soap products. It's not the norm everywhere. We have a few already in New Jersey, though, Montclair, Maplewood, and Red Bank, and there are a number of others in New York and Connecticut. Check it out and see if there's one in your community yet, or if there will be soon. Next slide. Always bring your reusable carrying bags to the stores after you've shopped. Return them back to your car so you have them and they're always available. Go paperless and opt out of catalogs and reduce your junk mail. You can do this, if you don't know, by registering with the National Do Not Mail list, which is found on the directmail.com's website. Or you can write to them at the address here, Direct Mail, 5511 Ketch Road, Prince Frederick, Maryland, 20678. Next slide, please. Recycle everything you can if it's made from recyclable material like plastic, aluminum, cardboard, paper, batteries, and electronics. Be sure to double check, though, on batteries to see whether or not you can recycle your alkaline batteries in your area. The average American household produces 4.5 pounds of waste per day, and 1/3 of this is in packaging. Unfortunately, too much of what we send to the recycling center still winds up in the ocean. For every pound of solid waste that goes to landfills, it generates 2 pounds of greenhouse gases. This includes transportation to the landfill and the natural decomposition. Compost, which are, grass clippings, kitchen scraps, and coffee grounds, which you can create yourself, is considered black gold for your garden. Other composts include bark, wood fiber, leaf mold, and manure. If you cannot create your own compost, go to a big box store or the garden center and use some peat moss, which does improve your plant and your soil health. Next slide, please. The fashion industry accounts for 10% of the global pollution. For example, I never knew this, think about it. Fiber, how do we end up with our fabrics? The yarn produced in South America is then transported to India for dyeing and manufacturing, which is then sent to China for sewing, and then to the US to be sold. So reduce purchases of new clothes. Do not buy fast fashion that treats cheap clothing as a perishable good that can be disposed of only after a season. Buy something that's higher quality if possible. Also consider buying secondhand and donating your used clothes. You can check in your area to see if the Salvation Army, Goodwill, etc. have reopened yet, or when they will be opening, that you can take advantage of those things. Next slide, please. The Environmental Committee of Montclair League of Women Voters developed this hanger for people to put on their door so they could refer to it on a frequent basis to remember how to reduce their carbon footprint. American households who are following these simple steps, which is everything that I've just covered in this presentation, are reducing their household environmental footprint by 25%. Imagine what this number would be if our whole community follows suit. Next slide, please. So we're going to ask you to think about what you can do to help save the planet. What can you commit to after watching this presentation? I'm sure you're doing much of what we've talked about, but is there one or two things that you can add to what you already do? Just use your common sense. Keep asking yourself questions like, are you buying less gasoline? Is your electricity bill going down? Did you put out less garbage than before? Use a carbon calculator to calculate your progress. And here is a place you can go, a website that will help you do that, listed on the screen. And for more resources, consult the web. If you would want to start a small, local, reduce your footprint community action group where you live, there is an excellent guide on how to do this. And one of the sources that we've used, which is called the Low Carbon Diet Booklet, available from the Empowerment Institute. That is at P.O. Box 428, Woodstock, New York, 12498. Or you can go directly to the website, which is www.empowermentinstitute, all lowercase, .net. Next slide, please. Here lists the sources that we have referenced throughout the presentation if you want to get some more information. We very much thank you for your attention and participation in this effort, and we wish you luck with the steps that you'll be taking to reduce your carbon footprint. And the last slide. If you should have any questions in regard to this presentation, feel free to go to the website in order to explore it further and gain more information. Thank you.